There we go. Let's try that again. Attention bowlers, we are going to get started from Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Again, my name is Steve Kelly, and I will be your host and guide during this Class D North match between today's challengers, away bowler Bryan Hebert versus home bowler Jonathan Hogan. That was Bryan Hebert with a 9-box, in case you missed it. Good as always to have you along with us. Originally live streamed on this Wednesday, April 17th, 2024, and available for rewatching anytime upon the conclusion of this match. If you're new to the ACST or Candlepin Bowling in general, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you and hope you enjoyed this match and Candlepin Bowling as a whole. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. Your continued viewership is greatly appreciated. For any of those with any audio or visual impairments, I'd like to highlight two things. First, this broadcast will be available with subtitles and live captioning. I will also be providing audible descriptions of the play-by-play action, as well as scoring to the best of my ability. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let me know in the comments. Bryan Hebert checks 10 after the second for 19 after 2. Bryan Hebert comes to us from home lanes of Lakeside in Manchester, New Hampshire, with a season record of 92 and 118 with 15 matches bowled so far, with 3 matches to go, counting this one. His home record is 42 and 56. His away record is 48 and 50. He's bowled 8 matches at home and 7 matches away so far. Season average 95.8 and a home average of 96.5. Away average 95.0. Bryan Hebert on the high-low jack, the 1-7-10. He takes one out for an 8-box. That's 27 and 3 for Mr. Bryan Hebert. We are at Academy Lanes tonight. First time I've covered a match here in the Blue Room, of all places. And it is an interesting room out of the red, the green, and the blue rooms in general. This room appears to be wood lanes, but possibly synthetic approaches, and the ball returns appear to be converted 10-pin ball returns. So it's a very interesting mishmash of equipment here at Academy Lanes. The blue room is no exception. Bryan Hebert shooting for a 10-box. The 1, the 5, the 3, and the 9 pins. Back row goes, the 1 and the 3 stay. That's an 8-box for Bryan Hebert for 35 after 4. Thanks for watching. If you're just tuning in, we are just getting started. The first game of 5 here. That's Bryan Hebert bowling on lane 32 here at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Bryan fires off the head pin to the left side. The 4 horsemen right side and the 9 pin are on the deck. And it looks like he could run down the right side 4 horsemen for a spare. Let's zoom in on that and see what Bryan Hebert can do. Bryan Hebert fires, and he's on the head pin. It dances around, but he wasn't on the pocket, so he got some awkward results, leaving the 3 pin and the 9 pin on the deck. He's going to shoot for a 10-box now, Bryan Hebert. 8, 9, or 10 possibilities here, and he's going to take a 9-box. That's going to be 44 and 5. That's the first half for Bryan Hebert here at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. We're going to be saying hello to Jonathan Hogan for the first time tonight. Jonathan Hogan, our home bowler, he is 147 and 77 for the season. He's bowled 16 matches so far with 2 matches to go, counting this one. He has a home record of 74 and 38 and an away record of 73 and 39. He's bowled 8 matches, both home and away thus far. Hogan punches out the right side with the right side half Worcester. The 3 and the 9 pins are knocked out. Jonathan Hogan's season average is 102.7. That's pretty high for the D class. His home average is 104.0. His away average is 101.4. He is the division leader of D North Division 4. That is Class D for destruction. Ahead of Bill Olson, Bryan Hebert, and Kevin Martell. Bryan Hebert, who Jonathan Hogan is bowling tonight, in the same division as Jonathan Hogan. And Bryan is really fighting for some points to try to stay in the game here. That'll be an 8-box for Jonathan Hogan to open up his first half of the first game here. Jonathan Hogan has held this position as a D North Division 4 division leader at least since November 20th. And overall, he's second place in D North, period. Jonathan Hogan fires. He's off to the right. Bit of an odd release there, taking out just the 6 and the 10. I think he knew about that when he released it. He kind of gave a bit of a grimace when he turned back around. Hogan's high single is 142. It was bowled against Todd Holbrook in round 12. His high series is 552. He bowled that against Bill Olson in round 16. And Jonathan Hogan is a very tall fellow like myself, and I'm noticing every once in a while, despite having the zoom camera way, way, way up high, every once in a while his head grazes the zoom cam. Hogan will take a 5 box for the second. That'll be 13 after 2 for Mr. Jonathan Hogan. Hogan with 38 strikes, 150 spares, 152 tens for the season so far. We are late in the season, though, so those are nearing end-game stats. He has a 43% perfect box percentage, 8,217 seasonal total pins prior to this match. Hogan on the head pin, a little bit full, but dropping 7. The 3, the 6, and the 10 pins are on the deck for a spare opportunity. How about we zoom in on that and take a good look at that on lane 32 at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. I'm Steve Kelly. That's Jonathan Hogan bowling. For the spare, Jonathan Hogan will take that spare right on the nice pocket. Nice gentle pocket shot. With that is our first mark of the night, of the evening, hopefully first of many. That's 23 plus a ball for Jonathan Hogan. Jonathan Hogan will now be filling that spare here on lane 32 at Academy Lanes. Jonathan Hogan with the 7th high single in the D class at 142. Hogan on that fill on the pocket. It's going to be a 6 fill with that late falling pin. That's 29 after 3 by my count. Hogan for another spare. Will he get it? He hit the wood. He attacked the wood a little behind the object pin, so he took a few more. Whoa! Welcome to Candlepin Bowling. That was a very late falling pin. I would almost hanker a guess that that could have been a plate problem, but 2 pin falls regardless. And that'll be a 10 box. Hogan cleans up a 10 after 4. 39 after 4 for Jonathan Hogan. So the scores here so far. Bryan Hebert at 44 after 5. Jonathan Hogan at 39 after 4 with 1 to go before he sits. And we say hi to Bryan Hebert once again. We are early in the first of 5th. Bryan Hebert at 44. Jonathan Hogan at 39, plus whatever he gets for the 5th before he sits. Thanks for watching the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, broadcast on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour Facebook page, as well as Candlepin Bowling Network. And I will be most likely uploading this to Candlepin Bowling Network later on once I review the footage and just make sure everything turns out okay. Jonathan Hogan with a left side not spread eagle, but a half Worcester second ball. He doesn't connect with the object pin, but pins are still falling. They're falling very slowly like dominoes. And I think I made this joke in my match previously. They fell a little like DiGiorno and less like dominoes. I got to stop making that Deliverance joke. Anyways, Jonathan Hogan for a 10 box. He'll take a 9, leaving the 10 box on the deck. Concluding his half, he will sit. 48 after 5 for Jonathan Hogan. Bryan Hebert at 44 after 5. If you're just tuning in, you haven't missed all that much just yet. We're going to see Bryan Hebert return to the approaches here. The Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Jonathan Hogan just finishing his first 5. The bowlers bowl 5 boxes at a time, and then they trade off. And they also trade off lanes. Bryan Hebert starting for the first time on lane 31. His name is Bryan Hebert. Yep. You're Steve. I'm Steve Kelly. Yep. Just letting someone know what who is bowling. Got some people physically watching the match tonight, so just joining them here in the audience. Bryan Hebert anyway, I believe he missed on the spare there, and he's shooting against the 3 and the 5 for a 10 box, and that's going to be a 10 box for Bryan Hebert. Bryan Hebert for the 10. Switch back to his name on the score. Oops. Also help if I put it in the right spot. There we go. 54 and 6 for Bryan Hebert by my account, and that is confirmed. We have CompuScore manual scoring at Academy Lanes, and fun fact, you can't see it on the stream, but it actually looks very similar to the scoreboard I built here. I built it based off of the CompuScore visual aesthetic, sort of used a lot of reference photos trying to do some reverse engineering. I kind of understood what the fonts were. There's sort of that classic IBM CGA early 90s old school PC fonts. Bryan Hebert shooting at the single pin head pin, and he'll take a 9 box by the looks of it. For 63-7, Bryan Hebert has been having a bit of a struggle-full season, if that is such a word, but he is 92-118 for the season with a home record of 42-56, and when he's away, he's 48-50. He's got a actually significantly better record when he's away with a .96 win-loss versus a .65 win-loss. He's bowled 7 matches away and 8 matches at home. Bryan Hebert drops 7, the 3-6-10 on the deck. Let's get a closer look at that. On lane 31, Hebert fires, and wow, that pin spun and got a lot of rotations. But despite hitting the object pin and a good spread of wood, he leaves the 10 pin on the deck, so he's shooting for 10 now. And Bryan Hebert will check 9. 9 in the 8th for 72-8 for Bryan Hebert. So Bryan Hebert overall averages 95.8. His home average is 96.5. His away average, 95.0. Hebert pitches. Off the headpin to the right, the 4 horseman left side, and the 9 pin on the deck. You can, quote-unquote, run down the 4 horsemen if you take the 1-2 pocket in this instance. When I was bowling Jeff Little, we saw this shot a lot. Hebert hits the correct pocket. I wouldn't have hit it any differently, but the pin spread just the wrong way. And now he's looking at a really ugly 10-box opportunity with the 7 and the 9, but that piece of wood could be the ticket. I'd say if you redline it or hit it a little bit upwards, and by upwards I mean to the left, you might be able to hit it, but it will depend on where this wood settles, and it also depends on the velocity of the ball, where you release it, how you release it, and a little bit of luck involved too. The decks here at Academy Lanes appear to be generously lubricated. That means you may get a lot of pin action. Some houses are very generous in juicing them up, some are not. This place has pretty decently juiced decks, especially here in the blue room. In the red room, it's a little bit more traditional. In the green room, things really slide like the Bruins on an ice rink. But Bryan Hebert will take an 8 for 80 after 9. Bryan Hebert off the head pin to the left, starting out his 10 box. 10th box. There's 2 down, 8 up. He fires off to the right of the head pin this time, overcorrects a little bit, leaving the 1 and the 2 pins on the deck. 8, 9, or 10 for Bryan Hebert on lane 31. And that's a 10 box. He nicely cleans that up. That'll be the end of the first game for Bryan Hebert, and he'll take a 90. Bryan Hebert's average is 95.8, so it's a little bit under par, I'd say, but still early. 90 is the benchmark for Jonathan Hogan to reach. With 48-5 and 1 mark, Jonathan Hogan has a decent chance of passing that. The way the points work here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour are if you tie, you take 1 point apiece per game. If you win, you take 2. And there's also a grand total pinfall windfall towards the end, where if you have the highest grand total pinfall following all 5 games, you take 4 points, and you take 2 points if you tie. Hogan not on a fill, dropping 4. With an awkward array of pins, but hitting the pocket might take it out, but he hits a little bit too full. And if we look at that a little bit closer, you'll see the 2, the 3, the 6, and the 10 pins are on the deck for Jonathan Hogan. Hogan fires for a 10 box, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, and he'll check 9 in the 6th. 57-6 for Jonathan Hogan now. What more can I tell you about Jonathan Hogan? He's got a mile-long list of superlatives, and he should, being the division leader, and generally one of the best bowlers in the D-class in general. He has the 2nd most spares in the D-class, the 2nd most strikes in the D-class, 150 spares, 38 strikes. He has the 4th highest perfect box percentage in D at 43%. Hogan checks out the 6 pin on the right side in his opening ball. This can be a pretty spare if you can take out the 1-2 or the 1-3 pocket, sort of like strike practice almost, and he doesn't quite do that. He leaves the 4 horsemen left side instead, the 1, the 2, the 4, and the 7 pins. The left side 4 horsemen, if he runs them down, he'll take a 10 box, taking out the 1 and the 2 in particular, and he's on the 1 and the 2, and that's a 10 box. He runs it down precisely like we drew it up in the locker room. That's 67-7 for Jonathan Hogan with that 10 box. He has to make it to 90 or better, 90 to tie, 91 or higher to take 2. Jonathan Hogan with 5 out of 16 matches over 520, 13 out of 16 matches over 500. In his past 5 matches, Jonathan Hogan has taken 38 points. And then, believe it or not, that's actually rather down compared to his previous 5, down by 12 specifically. He took 50 in the previous set of 5. Jonathan Hogan drops 5, an awkward array of 5 pins, the 5, 6, 3, 4, and 7. Hitting some version of the 3 pocket will take it out. He doesn't quite do that, but the wood is generous, and the juice decks definitely help that out. Only the 3 pin is left, and he's working on a 10 box now for a potential 77 after 8. 10 box, and guess what? That's 77 after 8. That's the second 10 in a row for Jonathan Hogan. And Jonathan Hogan, generally, he averages 2.38 strikes per match, 9.38 spares per match, and 9.50 tens per match. When Jonathan Hogan is home, he generally takes 4.63 points per home match, whereas Bryan Hebert on average has been averaging roughly 3.2 while he's away. Jonathan Hogan with a wiggly 9.5 drop, as I call it. The 4 pin, the only one standing, as wiggling. I almost would have considered it still eligible for falling based on that earlier action we saw where a pin fell very late, but going for a single pin spare, and Jonathan Hogan misses that single pin spare. The 4 pin stands tall. And Hazard's going down for a 10 box. Maybe Jonathan Hogan will get his 3rd 10 box in a row here. Hogan fires, and a little bit off to the left, wild pitch for a 9 box. He's at 86 and 9. He needs 4 to tie and 5 to win. Jonathan Hogan averages 4.56 points per away match. Hogan is a packer at Fabrizia Spirits. His home lanes are here at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Hogan a little full on the head pin, but pin's still falling. Still falling even. 7, 8, and 10 are the ones that are left remaining with the 7 pin wiggling. I would even consider that 7 pin possibly eligible to fall, though I think it's actually stabilizing now. Hogan on lane 31 for spare. A lot of wood. This could be a deceptive amount of dead wood. Might be difficult if it doesn't go the way if we think it's going to go. And yep, I had a feeling one of those was going to stand, but the 10 pin is the one that is unaffected by that dance of eternity that the wood took. So Jonathan Hogan is looking at a potential 96 if he can get this 10 box. And will he get it? That he will. That's 96 after 10 for Hogan. Hogan will take the first game here, 96 to 90, beating Bryan Hebert by 6. So that's 2 points for Jonathan Hogan in the first here. Not a lot in the way of marks just yet. Hogan has 1 spare for the day. Plenty of games to go, though, folks. This is game 1 of 5. You are watching the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour on Candlepin Bowling Network and the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour Facebook page. Thanks for watching. Transitioning to the second game here, Bryan Hebert is bowling in the blue on the right lane, on lane 32. He opens up on the head pin. Pins fly and spread a little bit, but he's left with the left side hay bale. The 2, the 4, the 5, the 7, and the 8 pins. Bryan for a spare. Doesn't quite connect with the object 2 pin. Takes out the 5 pin and the 5 pin only. 2, 4, 7, and 8 on the deck for Bryan Hebert. And he'll take, wow, 1 more. He hits the object pin, but just sails right through, and that's going to be a 7 box for Hebert to open up. Bryan Hebert. Overall, he is 4th in D North Division 4. He's behind Kevin Martell, Bill Olson, and Jonathan Hogan. In the wild card, he's in 12th place in D North overall. I am unsure if he's eliminated at this time, as the stats online appear to slightly conflict based on which one I'm looking at, so I won't say for certain if he is or is not currently eliminated from playoff contention. His high single is 128. He bowled that against Paul Kravitz in round 11. High series of 529 versus Bill Olson in round 3. Bryan Hebert has 21 strikes, 122 spares, and 102 tens. Bryan Hebert will take a 9 box. in the second for 16 after 2. With a perfect box percentage of 33%, Bryan Hebert has 7,182 seasonal total pins. With Bryan, it's feast or famine. Sometimes he takes double-digit points, 10 to 12 in a match. Otherwise, he takes between 0 and 4. And especially lately, he's had just a lot of struggles. And it's kind of difficult to sort of analyze what exactly is going on, but I think it kind of comes down to a little bit of aim and maybe just a little bit of nerves. Who knows? Against a 3-pin spare opportunity, Bryan Hebert only takes out the 10 box, leaving the 6 and the 9. He takes out the last 2 at least, cleaning up for a 10 box. That's 26 after 3 for Bryan Hebert with that 10 box. Bryan Hebert has 4 matches over 500 this season. In his past 5 matches, he has earned 30 points. That's only down 2 compared to 32 points in the previous 5. Compare that to Jonathan Hogan, who's been on a 12-point deficit in the same range comparisons. Bryan Hebert dropping 5. The 1, the 3, the 6, the 9, and the 7 pins on the deck. Bryan Hebert shooting for a spare. On that spare, he misses the center pin. Center object pin, the 1-3 pocket. And 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 box opportunity for Bryan Hebert on lane 32. And he will check 8. Check 8 after 4. After 4, he's at 34 after 4. Let's take a look at the scores for the second game in detail. Jonathan Hogan has not bowled yet. We are still at the top of the second game. Bryan Hebert about to throw his 5th and final box of the first half of this game. Bryan Hebert, ouch. He connects only with the 3-pin, and the 3-pin is the only thing that flies out. We call that in some circles a quarter Worcester. You got ripped off on your ticket to Worcester. Hebert connects with the head pin lightly and takes out the 8-pin, completing the 2-8 Worcester, along with an extra friend, the head pin. And this is going to be an ugly 10-box salvage mission for Bryan Hebert, and he makes a valiant attempt, though. That's a 9-box. 43 after 5 is going to be how the half concludes for Bryan Hebert. As Jonathan Hogan goes to step up. Let's take a look at Jonathan Hogan's stats here. And he is second overall in G North. A crazy season record of 147 and 77. Our division leader, Jonathan Hogan, now bowling on lane 32. Thanks for watching the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, this Class D North match on Wednesday night, April 17th at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Happy to broadcast here in the Blue Room at Academy Lanes. I have never not seen this room not stuffed with people. And to even be able to stand or sit in here tonight is actually pretty unbelievable. This place gets busy a lot. Funny enough, it's also mass school vacation week, and I thought it would have been a little bit busier during this time, but I guess it's a bit of a lull period. Jonathan Hogan attempted to spare, but he fouls one out. He's looking at a 10 box now versus the 1 of the 10. And he fires, and I believe that's going to be a 9 box. I will wait to confirm what the electronic scoreboard says. And yes, confirmed it is a 9 box for Jonathan Hogan. The way fouls work in Candlepin bowling is you see the channels on the left and the right, also known as gutters. If you throw a ball into one of those gutters and it pops out and takes pins that are standing, then those pins do not count as official pinfall. You have to deduct them from the final box total. And if you're on marks, it gets more complicated, and so on and so forth. If you take everything out, you got to reset, and the box ends, and yada, yada, yada. Hogan on the head pin, and wow, he only takes a few out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 up, 3 down. Weird amount of pins. And he takes a few more out, chopping a bit more out. 4, 5, 7, and 10 on the deck, and this is going to be an ugly 10 box. There's one piece of wood that might be able to help with the pinball action, or you can attempt to shoot at the 4, 7. We'll see what Hogan can do. Takes out only the 4, leaving the 5, 7, 10. That's a 7 box for Hogan. That's 16 after 2 for Jonathan Hogan. 16 after 2 for Jonathan Hogan. We compare that to 16 after 2 for Bryan Hebert. So actually in the second game, we're on a decent pace. These two bowlers. Hebert versus Hogan. Jonathan Hogan, the home bowler. Jonathan Hogan with a nice ball on the pocket, the 1-3 pocket. Taking out 8, leaving the 4 and the 7 on the deck. Zoom in on that to get a better, closer look. 4 and 7 on the deck on lane 32 at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Hogan fires, and he gets that spare. Excellent spare bid by Jonathan Hogan. That is 26 after 3, plus a ball. Hogan's second mark of the night, second spare of the night. No strikes thrown yet across either bowler. Still early again. Hogan, nearly as tall as I am, actually might even be taller, in the 6 feet range. He releases right on the head pin, a little bit too full. That's a 6 fill on the spare. So that's a 16 box, and that's 32 after 3 for Mr. Jonathan Hogan. This spare bid is interesting. I would say he has to take the 3-6 pocket for a spin, or shoot at the left of the 3 pin and hope the wood does the rest. But that shot was definitely not one of those two options. He takes out just the 6 pin and nothing else, leaving the 3-7-8 on the deck on lane 32 in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Former town of Pilgrim Lanes. And Hogan will take 2 more out for a 9 box for 41 after 4. He's now overtaking Bryan Hebert. Actually, real quick, I'll switch the score over. There we go. 41 after 4 for Jonathan Hogan now. Hogan on lane 32. And the pitch. Releases a little bit past the head pin on the 1-2 pocket, taking out a few for the road. 5 down, 5 up. 5-3, 7-9, 10. On lane 32, the object pin here is going to be the 3 pin. 3-5 pocket, the invisible 3-6 pocket. One of those, but not that. Sails through, air ball through the 3 and the 10 pins. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 box now, depending on what Jonathan Hogan throws here right now. Coming right up. He releases, takes out only 1 more for the road. That's a 6 box for Jonathan Hogan. He's going to sit on a 47.5. 47 to 43 here in the second. And total-wise, Hogan is up by 10 in the match in general, up in the game by 4. Hogan with more marks than Bryan Hebert. Bryan Hebert yet to throw his first mark of the night. Let's see if he can grill this up right about now. Some Bryan Hebert strike burgers coming up here at Lakeside Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Lakeside Lanes is Bryan Hebert's home house. And 8 fall, 9 fall. I bet he almost heard me. Well, he definitely tried, but the head pin stands tall. He missed the head pin, but like I said earlier, when the decks are really well juiced up in a house, sometimes places can really get some great pin action based on what you throw. Bryan Hebert misses that single pin spare. The head pin staring him down for a 10 box now. Hebert releases. And it's going to be a 9 box. That's where we will stand. 52 in 6 for Bryan Hebert. Appreciate you watching this Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour match. This is a season-long series of one-on-one Candlepin bowling matches between challengers organized into classes and divisions competing for playoff contention. Tonight is a D-class match. Don't let the letter deceive you, though. D stands for destruction. There's only so many classes because there are quite a few bowlers who are interested in this league. Actually, this fall, we're going to have a brand new E-class because of how many bowlers that are signing up. Contact Danny Finn on Facebook on the Candlepin Chat Facebook group if you're interested in signing up for the ACST, as the next season of the ACST is now forming. Hebert against the 10 pin, missing the spare. Working on a 10 box here. Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. I'm Steve Kelly. That's Bryan Hebert on lane 31, and he'll check 10. Nudging the 10 pin down for 62 in 7 for Bryan Hebert. I hope this broadcast finds you well. Everyone involved here, from the bowlers to the staff you cannot see, all appreciate your viewership and interest in this live stream, as well as Candlepin bowling as a whole. Bryan Hebert releases, and he's off the head pin, way off, taking only the 7 pin out. First spare. Let's see if Bryan Hebert can correct that release and go for the pocket. He's on the pocket. Will it go? The 5 and the 10 pins with a wiggly 5. That's called a right side setback, in case anyone is taking a test later for your Candlepin bowling license. 5-10 for a 10 box. Bryan Hebert, and he doesn't get a gutter ball, but he doesn't connect with the 10 pin either. That's an 8 box for Bryan Hebert for 70 after 8 now. 70 after 8 for Bryan Hebert. It'd be cool if you can get a 95 or higher to reach average. But anyways, we're at Academy Lanes tonight. It's located in Haverhill, Massachusetts, in Academy Plaza at 725 South Main Street, about 1.7 miles from downtown and 1.3 miles from the interstate. Bryan Hebert's first ball goes after the 10 pin this time. Wild pitch to the right. Bryan Hebert on the pocket. Will he take everything out for a spare? And the last pin falls. Call that a revenge ball when you take out the 7 or the 10 and you take everything else out. That's 80 plus a ball for Bryan Hebert. Let's see if he can recover some pins here and get to his average. Owned by the DeBurrow family, Academy Lanes opened in 1963 and celebrated 60 years of operation in December of 2023. There's actually a banner in this room commemorating that. Bryan Hebert for a 5-fill on the pocket, but left with a left side hay bale. That's 85 and 9 for Mr. Bryan Hebert. Get a closer look at that for a spare shot. It's pretty when it goes. Let's see what Bryan Hebert does. Can he release on it? And he takes out only the 5 on the piece of wood that was behind it, taking out nothing else. 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 box for Bryan Hebert now. He's shooting 4. He winds up, he pitches, he fires, and takes out one more for the road. That's a 7 box for Bryan. He concludes with a 92 for the second game. For a 2-game total of 182 for Bryan Hebert. 1 spare for the night. He's on the board for marks. Jonathan Hogan, 47 after 5, and currently with a 1.5 game total of 143 with 2 spares to his name tonight. Let's see what Jonathan Hogan can come up with now. Thanks for watching on Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Jonathan Hogan, our home bowler, releases on lane 31 off the left of the head pin, and we call that a washout. Not necessarily split, but a washout. Thanks to Bob Lee for educating me on that shot name. 1, 5, 3, 9, 6, 10, 7 on the deck. And he Worcesters out the right side, washes out the right side. He's left with the 1, the 5, the 7, and the 10. He's left with a tripod down on the deck. I don't know if it's actually called a tripod, but it looks like one of my camera tripods, so we'll call it that. And by tripod, I mean mic stand. He misses. That's a 6 box for Jonathan Hogan. 6 box for Jonathan Hogan. 53 after 6 for Jonathan Hogan. Featuring 44 lanes across 3 rooms, Academy Lanes is one of the largest Candlepin bowling houses in New England, featuring 8 lanes more than Leda Lanes. A unique feature of Academy Lanes is its 3 unique rooms with seemingly 3 different lane personalities. The leftmost room, known as the Red Room, was most recently renovated and seems to fall the most traditional, with all wood approaches and all wood lanes. The middle room, that's this room where we're in tonight, the Blue Room, is the largest room, features glow bowling and what feels like a slight mix of wood and synthetic lanes, while the rightmost room out of view here, known as the Green Room, is all synthetic. In the Green Room is also Pub 125, newly added in 2022. Located in the Green Room, the rightmost room offers food, drinks, and seating and sports viewing on several large TVs. Huge TVs, I might add. That's a 9 box for Jonathan Hogan. In 7, he has 62. Compare that to Bryan Hebert's 62 and 7. Let's take a good look at that. So they are on pace with one another in the 7th. Jonathan Hogan will definitely need a mark to stay on pace here. Academy Lanes has a healthily stocked pro shop featuring plenty of brands of bowling balls, bags, towels, shoes, and accessories. Recently, both Bryan Hebert and myself picked up new Dexter-branded bowling shoes on a sale here, which was awesome considering how hard it can be to find good bowling shoes nowadays. Academy Lanes is sanctioned by the International Candlepin Bowling Association as well as affiliated with the Massachusetts Bowling Association. Jonathan Hogan having a heck of a time out there. Just chopping out wood. He's looking at a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 box. Punching out a lot, taking out single pins and not much else. Hogan releases for the 10 box, and he takes a 7. 69 in 8 for Jonathan Hogan. So here's some trivia. It seems that Academy Lanes' website first came online around November 28th, 2001 with a classic "This page is under construction" banner, with the full site opening up in archive.org around March 27th, 2002, at least according to the Wayback Machine. And Hogan, there's a strike. There's the strike we've been looking for. He fires, and right in the pocket. This time everything goes down instead of punching out straight. He's at 79 in 9 plus 2 balls. At this point in the game, Bryan Hebert was at 85 with a spare 5. So Jonathan Hogan has some ground to regain here. But with that fill, he might have been granted some respite. When digging through old archived versions of Academy Lanes' website on archive.org's Wayback Machine, I found that they had glow bowling at least as far back as May of 2002, so Academy Lanes was quite a pioneer in that regard. Jonathan Hogan drops 4 for the first ball of his strike fill. See if he can get a spare off of this. 1, 2, 4, 8, 6, and 10. He takes out a few more, leaving 2 pins on the deck for an 8 fill on the strike. That might have been just the bump he needed. That puts him at 87 and 9. And I think actually that will probably do it with this 8 box. Come to think of it, he nudges down 1 more for a 9 box, and he'll take the second game, 96 to 92. Jonathan Hogan takes the second. He's at 4 points for the night, beating Bryan Hebert by 4 this time around. He's at 1 strike and 2 spares. Bryan Hebert with 1 spare for the night. Hogan up in the match by 10 and up in the game by 4. That's your score update, provided by the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour and Candlepin Bowling Network. CBN, the place to watch the bowlers. So we're now going to be moving on to the third game here. Welcome to the third game. Thanks for watching the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour here on this Wednesday night at Academy Lanes. Let's take a look at Bryan Hebert's stats real quick. He's 12th in D-Class Division 4, D-North Division 4. And overall, he's had a bit of a struggle of a season this year. It is unclear if he's eliminated from the playoffs again. I won't say for certain. I'm sure if someone is watching and has better access to stats than I do right now, you can verify that for me. I was finding inconclusive evidence on that, so I won't say for certain. A little bit tough to measure some of the stats based on the matches being bowled asynchronously and sometimes out of order, and some bowlers get ahead of others. But Bryan Hebert has 7 down, 3 up, and wow, that 2-pin is glued to the ground. Won't fall, and the 4-pin won't fall either. That is going to be an 8 box for Bryan Hebert to open up the third game here. Just the other pin cam here while we have a free moment. But yes, let's take a look at Bryan Hebert's stats once again. Perfect box percentage of 33, and honestly, I think that's a little bit kind of the key issue that Bryan struggles with right now. The thing about Candlepin bowling is it's a learning process. You know, you got to figure out kind of where you excel at versus where you have to work on. Bryan Hebert with a quick dropping 9 drop versus the 5-pin with a piece of wood. This should be a layup of a spare. Well, I shouldn't have said that, but he caps the piece of wood in front of the 5-pin, and it careens the ball out of the way and out of harm's way of the 5-pin. The stripeless 5-pin on lane 32 at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Bryan Hebert will take 10. He'll miss the second and get the third for a 3-ball spare. We'll just call it a 10 box. Candlepin bowling was first played in 1880 in Worcester, Massachusetts. It's thought to have been developed by a man named Justin Pop White, owner of a billiards and bowling hall. Fun facts. There'll be a quiz later. Bryan Hebert dropping 6, 1, 2, 3, and 6 pins on the deck. And will he get the spare? And oh my goodness, give it to him. There it is. I was going to be mad for him if that spare didn't go. So Hebert will take a spare in the third for 28 after 3 plus a ball. Definitely deserved it after missing that 5-pin single-pin spare. Hebert fires, filling that spare, and he's going to take 3. My goodness. Well, it's a 13 box for Bryan Hebert, 31 after 3. So compared to 10-pin bowling, Candlepin allows for up to 3 balls thrown in a frame as opposed to the maximum of 2 in 10-pin. In Candlepin, knocking down all 10 pins at the third ball results in a 10 box. Think of it as a spare with a 0 fill, or I very lovingly call it the 3-ball spare. Bryan Hebert taking a 7 box, leaving the 1, the 5, and the 9 pin on the deck for 38 after 4. One of the coolest things about Candlepin bowling is that it's a more accessible game compared to 10-pin bowling. Why? Well, for one, the bowling balls are significantly smaller and lighter, lessening strength and age requirements by a significant margin. Hebert fires, and he drops 7, drops 8. The 3 and the 10 pin, 3 and the 7 pins are on the deck. Taking the 3-pin out from the right side should be enough to take out the 7-pin, but there's some wood that might interfere. Let's see what happens. Well, he misses the 3-pin entirely, sailing in between the 3 and the 7. For a maximum of 48 after 5, Bryan Hebert is shooting for an 8, 9, or 10 box. And he'll settle for somewhere in between for a 9 box. That's 47 after 5 for Bryan Hebert. And that's what he'll sit on. 47 after 5 for Bryan Hebert. Consistent at least. He's got 2 spares for the night. We'll say hello to Jonathan Hogan once more. Jonathan Hogan, our home bowler tonight at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. That's Hogan in the green on lane 32. His first ball of the 3rd game. He fires. The 2nd time tonight, he's chopped out a quarter Worcester, only the 3-pin. Some shots are harder to get than a strike, and this is definitely one of them, I gotta say. Look at that. Quarter Worcester, Jonathan Hogan, 4 spare. And he gets a left side half Worcester. That's a 75% Worcester right there. Take out the 9-pin, and he'll have a 4 box and a complete round trip to Worcester. He'll get his full money's worth for that ticket. Hogan for, my goodness, an ugly 10 box attempt, and he'll complete the trip to Worcester. That's a 4 box. It's not great statistically, but it's a fantastic thing to talk about. So that's a 4 box for Jonathan Hogan. 4 box he definitely went to war for. He didn't miss anything, but well, I don't know what to tell you much more about that. Full Worcester. From quarter Worcester to full Worcester. We went 25% to 75% to full. Hogan on the head pin. Much better shot this time. Pin still falling. 9 drop. 7-pin is the only one left on the deck. And that's where we'll sit. There's a lot of wood. This wood might be deceptive for Jonathan Hogan. 6 pieces of deadwood on lane 32 versus the 7-pin, and it all careens around the 7-pin. That was precisely what I was worried about. I thought it was just all going to slide out of the way. That's the kind of shot where you almost have to throw it very light. In my experience, throwing light in situations like that really helps you out. Hogan will miss the single pin with the wood cleared for a 9 box for 13 after 2 for Jonathan Hogan. Oh, goodness. Candlepin bowling is a great sport to play for folks of nearly any age. The flexibility of the sport's physical requirements allow a wide variety of accessibility. Far less back pain than 10 bowling, room for breaks and rest in between turns, and camaraderie among friendly competition, something one does not often see in other sports. Very unique. And Jonathan Hogan will drop 9, leaving only the 4-pin on the deck. Much less wood to deal with. Single pin spare once again for Jonathan Hogan. Both bowlers struggling with single pin spares tonight. Missing that 4-pin, he hits the piece of wood that was actually behind it. Safe out of harm's way to the 4-pin. Hogan shooting for a 10 box on lane 32 at Academy Lanes to conclude his 3rd box. He's at 13 after 2. Hogan shoots. He'll take a 9. Hogan's Alley. If anyone's ever played that on the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a game where you shoot with the NES Zapper. Kind of a fun little game where you just shoot at these virtual cans, and fun little game. Just thought of that when I thought of Jonathan Hogan. Hogan's Alley, literally. Bowling alley with Hogan on it. Okay, I'll stop now. Sorry. Hogan fires on lane 32. Opening ball of the 4th frame. 6 drop. Awkward split. 2, 4, 6, and 10 pins on the deck. 22 after 3 for Jonathan Hogan. That rough 4 box at the beginning really set him back a little bit. Hogan fires on the left side. That was the right idea, but he is a little bit too much to the left, only taking out the 4-pin, leaving the 2, the 6, and the 10. Hogan for a 7, 8, 9, or 10 box on lane 32, and he sails right through the center for a 7 box. That's 29 after 4 for Jonathan Hogan. Let's take a look at where we are in comparison. Bryan Hebert was at 38 at this point in the match. Jonathan Hogan, in the game that is, Jonathan Hogan was at 29 after 4 at this point in the match. So Bryan Hebert is up by a little bit by this point. We'll see if that lead will hold into the 5th box here. Hogan fires, lane 32. Right side half Worcester once again. I think he's throwing a little bit too hard. I think I'm starting to understand what's happening here a little bit more. So Hogan fired right on the 2-8. Took it out for a right side half Worcester. Hogan releases for a spare. Not a full Worcester, but not much better. He takes a few more out on the left side. 1, 2, 5, 6, and 10 pins on the deck for a 10 box. 5 minimum, 10 maximum. For a potential 39 and 5 if Hogan can make this and he misses. Oh my goodness. It's going to be a 5 box for what appears to be 34 after 5 for Jonathan Hogan. That opens up some opportunity for Bryan Hebert now. 47 and 5. Hogan with 4 points for the night so far. Bryan Hebert standing to gain 2 points if he can take the third game here. Window of opportunity here now for Bryan Hebert. Bryan Hebert Jr. Bryan Hebert averaging 1.4 strikes per match, 8.13 spares per match, 6.80 tens per match. Bryan Hebert chopping out the left side half Worcester for a spare now. Takes out only the 6. Some might call that a lemon drop if he had missed, if this was the first ball and he didn't get the left side half Worcester. Averaging 2.93 points per home match and 3.2 points per away match. Bryan Hebert will take what appears to be a 6 box. 6 box for Bryan Hebert, that's 53 in 6. Recently, Bryan Hebert faced Win Trafton at Lakeside Lanes in round 15. He took 2 points. He had a bit of a struggle that match. He averaged 95.7 and took 452 on the series. 1 strike, 6 spares, 8 tens. Hebert for a spare. Ugly first ball, but the second ball was looking favorable, but he's left with the head pin, and the head pin only for a 10 box now. Hebert shooting for a 10 box, and he will take that 10 box on the single pin. That's a 10 box, 63 in 7 for Bryan Hebert now. Bryan Hebert's home lanes are Lakeside and Manchester, New Hampshire, though Bowling Acres Grill in Peterborough, New Hampshire is technically closer to him. He lives in Rindge, New Hampshire. Hebert fires on lane 31 off the head pin to the right side, leaving the 1, the 2, the 7, and the 9 pins. Left side 4 horsemen minus the 4 pin. He's shooting for a spare. Fires. And he takes it. That's a mark for Bryan Hebert. Spare in the 8th, 73 plus a ball. Bryan Hebert Jr. is the son of Bryan Hebert Sr. and Marta Hebert, both very active bowlers in the 80s, 90s, and still today. Both of which, yes, they still bowl today. So them, Bryan Jr. and myself, bowl Sunday nights at Lakeside Lanes in the mixed league. Prior to that, we bowled in the Wednesday night leagues at Leda Lanes prior to mid-2020. Bryan Hebert filling that spare with 8. It might have been the break he needed. Shooting for another spare. Will he get 2 in a row? And he takes 1 out of 2. Left only with the 2 pin on the deck. Bryan shooting for a 10 box in the 9th. And he will take 9 for 90 in 9. Hebert is a secondary manufacturing lead at Microspec Corporation, which produces medical tubing and focuses on extrusion technology. Bryan manages a team of folks who help produce these parts. So the next time you're hooked up to something medical, check to see if it consists of Microspec parts. Bryan washing out the left side, leaving the 7 pin. 3 down, 7 up. For the spare, on the pocket. Pins dance around, leaving the 5 and the 7 on the deck. So he stands to get 100 if he can take out this left side setback, the 5 and the 7. It's going to be a difficult shot, though. He tries to play the wood, doesn't get anything. He's going to take an 8. Over average, 98 for Bryan Hebert. First time tonight he's over average. So the stage is set for Jonathan Hogan with a low 34 half. This might be blood in the water that Bryan Hebert has detected, but let's see what Jonathan Hogan can cook up next here at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Thank you for watching the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, broadcast on both Candlepin Bowling Network and the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour page. I'm Steve Kelly. That's Jonathan Hogan on lane 31 on the left lane. He fires a little bit too full on the head pin with a banana split, the 4, 6, 7, 10. Difficult shot to make, even more difficult with that piece of wood far out ahead of the 6-10. Got to pick a side and go with it. Hogan likely will opt for the right side, and he does. He plays the wood. He only takes out the right side, leaving the 4 and the 7, opting for pins rather than theatrics of a spare. So Hogan with a 34 half Opening up the second half of the potential 10 box. He's going to take an 8 box. Hogan's Heroes, 42 after 6. If you live in the area or are willing to make the pilgrimage, the Candlepin bowling community would absolutely appreciate your interest and visitation. Check out candlepin.org and click Go Bowling to find your nearest center if you would like to give this unique regional sport a try, as Hogan fires on lane 31, a much more favorable 8 drop this time. He's left with the 4-8. Piece of wood in front of the 4-8. This is another one of those situations where you really got to be careful about how you shoot this. Hogan fires, redlining the piece of wood, but the 4-pin does not go. He had to hit it more on the left side, and redlining it sent it more further back. And the way Jonathan Hogan's been throwing tonight, he's been punching full, throwing a little bit too hard and a little bit too fast for that kind of action to happen. He'll take a 9 box. Here in the 7th for 51, down to Bryan Hebert's 63 at the same point in the match. But Hogan has 2 games and 4 points so far tonight. If we ended the game right now, Hogan would be at 4 and Bryan Hebert would be at 2. Not counting the total, of course. Hogan releases, again, a little bit full, and he has the 2-3-4-6. No luck for Jonathan Hogan. He either has to put a spin on the ball or just take the edge off just a little bit to knock down those miles per hour. But this is an ugly split, an ugly spare leave, an ugly everything. He's going to release, just going for broke, but sails right through the void, and the void stares back. It's the hole where he already knocked it out, where the 1 and the 5 once stood. 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 box for Jonathan Hogan on lane 31 at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. And he does it twice. So good he had to shoot down the center 3 times in a row for a 6 box. 57 after 8 for Jonathan Hogan. 57 after 8. That's a rough game. Jonathan Hogan, our division leader, really struggling here in the 3rd. In round 16, Jonathan Hogan faced Bill Olson. He took 10 points to Bill's 4. He had a 552 series. That was his high for the season. So I don't know if this is a hangover game or what. Every game has been over 100 in that match against Bill Olson, except for the 3rd, which was a 99. Jonathan Hogan had a 106, 133, 99, 103, and 111. 4 strikes, 13 spares, and 11 tens in that match. And ouch, right? Jonathan Hogan just missing the object pocket, missing the object pins. No spare for Jonathan Hogan on that 6 drop, 1369. Shooting for a 10 box on lane 31. Will he get it? Nope. I think something about that release was just off. 6 box, 63 and 9 for Jonathan Hogan. This could be huge for Bryan Hebert in terms of the total. This deficit is getting a little bit wild. Bryan Hebert was at 90 at this point in the match, in the 9th. Jonathan Hogan at 63. A triple strike will not win this game for him. And yeah, that definitely seals the deal right there for sure, if it didn't before mathematically. He drops 6, leaving the 4 horsemen right side. The 1, the 3, the 6, and the 10. Has to run him down, take the 1-3 pocket out. Just ignore that wood. That wood will not really affect much. Hits the 3-6-10, missing the head pin by just an inch or so. No spare. He's looking at a potential 73 for the best case scenario here if he gets the head pin. And that will be a 73 game for Jonathan Hogan with that 10 box. 73 to 98. Bryan Hebert will take the 3rd game and recover a decent amount of the total. In fact, he's now up in the total by 15. It was that close of a match in terms of the total. So Bryan Hebert now looking at least 2 points, so he won't go home empty-handed. And if he can hold steady for the next 2 games, he'll take another 4. So he could potentially take 6 or more. We still have 2 games to go and 4 points between those 2 games, of course. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, Class D for Destruction North at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. We're going to move on to the 3rd game now. Bryan Hebert returning to the approaches. Just resetting everything for the 4th game. We're also going to take a break here, looks like, for at least a couple of seconds. So we saw Bryan Hebert's stats. Let's look at the standings. We haven't talked about the standings all that much visually yet. So Bryan Hebert is 4th in the same division as Jonathan Hogan. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here when we have a couple of pausing moments. Bryan Hebert releasing on lane 32. dropping 5. The 4 horsemen left side plus the 9-pin on the deck. You know the drill. Run down the 1 and the 2 for the 4 horsemen and hit full enough to take out the 9-pin. Ball bounces, but he gets it. Hebert with a merciful spare. I thought it wasn't going to go with that bounce. I heard that bounce, and I thought, oh no, that's going to careen out of the way, but I think it actually course-corrected wherever he was throwing. So Hebert at 10 plus a ball after 1. So far perfect for the game in terms of marks. Hebert may smell blood in the water. Bryan releases on lane 32, off the pocket to the left, and ouch, to Phil. That's a left side half Worcester. A little bit too hard and too fast on the 2 and the 8 pins. Hebert releasing on lane 32 for the spare, and he almost converts, leaving the 5 and the 9 pins on the deck. Take a look at that piece of wood. Be careful of that piece of wood now. Shooting for a 10 box. That piece of wood might defer the ball, or derail the ball, but he doesn't. He hits it full enough for a 10 box. That's 22 after 2 for Bryan Hebert. 2 on the spare, but still not bad recovery-wise and pinning-wise. So real quick, so here's the standings. Bryan Hebert is trailing Jonathan Hogan by quite a bit, 92 to 118 versus 147 and 77 for Bryan Hebert. He releases on lane 32, and wow, deja vu, but on the right side half Worcester, the 3 and the 9 pins taken out. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Punching too full. Bryan Hebert throwing a little bit too far and a little bit too hard, and ouch, I gotta stop saying ouch. He sails through the hole in the second ball where the 3 and the 9 pins were. Almost connects with the head pin, but misses just enough. And the third ball, salvage mission, takes a 7, leaving the 5, the 6, and the 10 on the deck. That's a 7 box. Oops. Excuse me, 7 box and a third for 29 and 3. Here in the fourth game, starting out the first half of the fourth game. Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, Class D North. Hebert on the head pin and on the pocket, and pins are still wobbling. That was an awkward drop. 4, 5, and 9 pins. The 9 pin is the pin on the right sides in the back row. This is a weird shot. I would redline that piece of wood between the 5 and the 9. Velocity will come into play on this shot. But Hebert shoots in between the void of the 4 and the 5 pins on lane 32. Academy Lanes, Haverhill, Massachusetts. The blue room, the half synthetic, half wood room. Hebert takes a 10 box, missed the second, get the third, but hey, still a pretty shot. Glad that we saw it up close. After 4, Bryan Hebert is at 39. Previously, Bryan Hebert worked at Supreme as a technical coordinator. He's great at rigging up audio equipment, providing recommendations for microphones and such. Hebert taking out 2, taking out 3. A couple pins fall in the back row. I want to say 3 of them fell. Hebert releases 4 spare and sails right into the void where the first ball went. Seems to be a theme of the past box or two. He's shooting for a 10 box now, Bryan Hebert. Lane 32, and oh my goodness, he got absolutely rocked by that box. That's a 3 box. Ouch. That is going to be 42 after 5 for Bryan Hebert. A disappointing end to a otherwise great half. 42 after 5 for Bryan Hebert. That 3 box really kind of took the wind out of his sails. Not the greatest thing to sit on, but hey, that's Candlepin bowling for you some days. Jonathan Hogan returning to the approaches. Jonathan Hogan, as we mentioned before, first in his division. Bryan Hebert fourth in the division. Jonathan Hogan dropping 7, 6, 7, 10. I had the opportunity to speak to Jonathan Hogan prior to the start of the match, and originally he was going to be moving to North Carolina, but apparently plans have changed, so he will be back next year, and likely in the C class, as his average now meets the criteria of the C class rather than the D class. So these are Jonathan Hogan's likely final games in the D class here as he gets moving onward and upward. Jonathan Hogan shooting for an 8, 9, or 10. That's going to be an 8 box for Jonathan Hogan. 8 after 1 for John Hogan versus 12 after 1 for Bryan Hebert. Here in the fourth. Still a game and some change to go here. Jonathan Hogan's a right-handed bowler, slides on his left foot. He lives in Haverhill, originally from Danvers, Massachusetts. And he washes out the left side, dropping 4, leaving 6 up on the deck. Shooting for a spare. This is more or less the same kind of ball you'd probably want to throw for a strike. Taking out a few more for the road, leaving the 1 and the 6. 8, 9, or 10 box for Jonathan Hogan. 8, 9, or 10 box for Jonathan Hogan. And we'll find out right now. And he'll take that 10 box, cleans up. 18 after 2. Take a look at the standings once again, and I'll show you something else here. Let's look at the overall wild cards. So Jonathan Hogan's already in it as he's a division leader. Bryan Hebert is 3 places out. He has to pass 4 folks. Excuse me, four spaces out. He has a ways to climb, and at the same time, though, I'm unsure if it is necessarily possible to get into that bracket at this point, this late in the season. But I won't say for certain. Hogan having some trouble finding the head pin. 2 balls sailing off to the right. This is a 3 box or better at this point for Jonathan Hogan. This is a salvage mission, shooting for a 10 box. He fires. A little closer to the head pin this time, but he's going to take a 6. Poor guy just can't find the head pin tonight. 24 after 3 versus 29 after 3 for Jonathan Hogan. Take a look at some averages. So Jonathan Hogan is currently 5th in Class D. Bryan Hebert down in 25. 102.71 for Jonathan Hogan. 95.76 for Bryan Hebert. Jonathan Hogan, wow, it's the same as his first ball in the previous box, but he's off to the left this time. I don't know if fatigue is setting in or what. I think he's trying to correct punching out a lot, but at the sacrifice of aim or something. Not entirely sure what it is, but Jonathan Hogan's working on it. It's a bit of a work shot, but he almost gets the spare on that. That was a better ball. Pins sail all around except for the 6 pin. 9 or 10 box for Jonathan Hogan here in the 4th. 1 ball and 1 box before he sits. 9 or 10. What's it going to be? It's going to be a 9 box. He sails into the gutter off to the right. 33 after 4 for Jonathan Hogan versus 39 after 4 for Bryan Hebert at the same points in the match. Take a look at the superlatives. It's all the Jonathan Hogan show in terms of that department. 4th in perfect box and 7th in high singles. Jonathan Hogan, though, wow. Since the last game and this game, he's been having trouble with the aim. I know John Winchell gave me some great advice during the Candlepin Skin show, and I remember he said, doesn't matter what you're doing, don't change a thing. If you're locked in, you'll figure it out. So words of wisdom from John Winchell, in case anyone wants to know. Jonathan Hogan's second ball washes out the left side except for the 7 pin. But only 3 are down and 7 are up. Again, a salvage mission for a 10 box for Jonathan Hogan. He fires. More fall. It's going to be a 7. It's going to be a 7 for 40 after 5 at the half for Jonathan Hogan. This is game 4.5. 4.5 game total of 305 for Jonathan Hogan. 4.5 game total of 322 for Bryan Hebert. Bryan Hebert has retaken the match lead since the 3rd game. He's up 17 right now. Currently up in the game by 2. So Bryan Hebert returns to the approaches now. Jonathan Hogan having some trouble. Bryan Hebert also having some trouble. He made a little gesture there saying I think he had a wrist motion issue there on that release. Some bowlers you can kind of tell based on the after effects of what they throw in terms of if they thought it was a good or a bad ball. Second ball, a little bit better, leaving the 4 horseman left side of the 9 pin. Has to run down the 1-2 pocket for a 10 box. Shooting for a 10, Bryan Hebert fires. And he's going to take what appears to be an 8. Wait on that wiggling pin, because as we learned in the first game, pins fall late. It's going to be an 8 box for Bryan Hebert for 50 and 6. 50 and 6 for Bryan Hebert at this point in the game. If you're watching, thanks for watching. If you're new to this Candlepin Bowling broadcast, I hope this has been a fun and enjoyable experience for you. If you're just a returning viewer, just back for another match, I'm glad to see you and hear from you again. Well, maybe not see you. I can't exactly see you, but you know what I mean. Bryan Hebert dropping 7, the 4 horsemen minus the 4 pin. The 1, the 2, and the 7 pins are on the deck. He's shooting for a spare now. The 1-2 pocket will take this out. Takes out the 2-7, leaving the 1, missing the 1. So that's a 10 box opportunity for Bryan Hebert right now. It'll be his 3rd 10 box of the game if he gets it. Will it be? Nope. Still 2 10s for the game. That's 9. That's a 9 box. 59 after 7 for Bryan Hebert. And he's off to the races, trying to get something akin to his previous game and maybe less like the first two. He had a 98 in the previous game. That was over average. Bryan Hebert could really use a mark to put this away. He's on the head pin, and that was kind of a promising shot. 7 drop, the 4-7-10. With wood. Again, some wood that may or may not help. It depends on how you hit it. Could go, could not. We'll see what happens. Bryan Hebert fires for a spare, and he misses the object wood, misses the object pin. 4-10, 4-10 for Bryan Hebert. 8, 9, or 10 box he's shooting for in the 8th. 59 after 7 so far. Shooting for that 10, and he'll take a 9. Almost 10, but 9. 68 and 8 for Bryan Hebert. 68 and 8. So again, here's some... Not much we can say about Bryan Hebert in terms of the statistical superlatives, but hey, that's what happens. Anyways, Bryan Hebert in the 9th. Fires first ball, right side half Worcester. The 3 and the 9 are taken out. Shooting for a spare. Going for the spare. He releases on the head pin a little bit too full, and he gets an awkward array of pins on the second ball. The 2, 4, 5, 6, and 10 pins. No wood to help him. 2-4, 2-5 pocket is the ticket to taking this one out. He fires right on the 2-pin, 2 full. That's a 6 box. 74 and 9 for Bryan Hebert at this point in the match. And he's really going to need a mark or something to kind of get things a little bit course corrected here. But at the same time, Jonathan Hogan is at 40 after 5, but statistically he is very good at getting strikes and spares, and he's had more marks in general than Bryan for the night. So never say never for counting Jonathan Hogan out, despite the struggles he's had in the past game and a half here. Bryan Hebert dropping 8. The 2 and the 6 pins are what he has to shoot at. Right side of the 2-pin will take this out. And oh no, that went wildly out of its targeted location. He's still left with the 2 and the 6, but he's shooting for a 10 box now. Hebert will take an 8. Struggling on those mark conversions. Final game total for game 4 is going to be 82 with a 4-game total of 362 for Bryan Hebert for the night so far with 1 game remaining. Jonathan Hogan, meanwhile, with 40 after 5 with some struggles of his own. Kind of a reference to The Cat Came Back, if anyone knows that one. 40 after 5 for Jonathan Hogan. Seeing if he can make something happen here at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts, just like he did earlier in this match. Right side, a half Worcester. Once again, we've seen a lot of those tonight. And this is no different. So Jonathan Hogan shooting for a spare with the 3 and the 9 pins out. Half Worcester, 50% Worcester, and he releases, and he already got those, John. 3 and the 9 still missing. Second ball sails through the invisible 3 and the 9. Can't give him twice the value for that, unfortunately. Shooting for a 10 box now. 31. Lane 31, Academy Lanes, Haverhill, Massachusetts, on the pocket. Salvages it for a 7 box. 47 and 6 now for Jonathan Hogan. 4 boxes to go in the 4th. He has a benchmark of 82 or higher to reach to take points. 82 for a tie. 83 or higher for 2 points for Jonathan Hogan, who's taken 4 points so far for the night. This might be a bit of a pivot point in terms of who takes the majority of the points, though. In the early phases of the match, it seemed like Jonathan Hogan was on a tear, but since then he's sort of really slowed down, as his first ball here only takes out the 4-pin on the left. Some might call that a lemon drop. Releasing on the pocket, but the pins dance around a little bit more, leaving a right side hay bale. That's the 3, 5, 6, 9, 10 for a 10 box. 5 box minimum, 10 box maximum. Hogan will take a 6. That's going to be 53 in 7 for Jonathan Hogan. So we're having a fantastic time here at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts, watching Bryan Hebert bowl against defending home bowler Jonathan Hogan here on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Good as always to have you along. I'm Steve Kelly. That's Jonathan Hogan bowling on lane 31. 5 pins down, 5 pins up after 1 ball thrown so far. The 2, the 4, the 6, the 7, and the 10 box. He's shooting for a spare now. A little bit too full on the 2-4. 6, 7, 10 on the deck. He's at 53 after 7. No marks this game so far for Jonathan Hogan. That's 7 pitchforks on the CompuScore scoreboard. We'll take a 9 box. I don't know what's going on with Jonathan Hogan in this game, but it's really slowing down. That's 62 in 8 with 2 to go. And yes, so we're at Academy Lanes, established 1963. CompuScore, 3 rooms, like we discussed earlier. There's also coaching programs at Academy Lanes, particularly for youth bowlers. I've seen some folks like Aaron St. Cyr and Josh Daly here. Some of the best training some of our younger bowlers, up-and-coming bowlers, for skill and all kinds of assists, aim assists, skill assists, all kinds of assists. It's great to have coaching programs in Candlepin bowling. Great to have someone else just kind of tell you, hey, why don't you try this, or work on this a little bit, or tweak this, that kind of thing. It helps a lot. It goes a long way. Ouch, Jonathan Hogan fouls that ball out. That's a -1, and that's going to be a 7 box. Really struggling this game, Jonathan Hogan. That's 69 after 9. Bryan Hebert, meanwhile, at 74-9. Bryan Hebert might stand to take some points if Jonathan Hogan can't get a mark here, because a 10 box will get him to 79, so he needs more than a 10. He needs a spare plus, or a strike plus. Hogan releases off the left of the head pin. No more strike possibility here, but he's looking at the 4 horsemen right side plus the 8 pin. 1, 3, 6, 10, 8. For the spare, he needs this spare. Hits a little bit full, and everything falls with the 10. That piece of wood doesn't roll back to take the 10 pin out. So Bryan Hebert will take this 4th game, and suddenly this match has become a whole lot more competitive. Swinging back in Bryan Hebert's favor. That's a 10 box and a 79 4th game total for Jonathan Hogan, for a 4-game total of 344, down from Bryan Hebert's 4-game total of 362. Bryan Hebert takes the 4th game by 3 and up in the match by 18 now. Both of our bowlers with 4 points apiece so far here in the 4th. So that, again, makes the 5th game huge. The 5th game is going to be worth 6 points. So who will go 10-4? We'll find out. 6 points, because when you get grand total pinfall, that is 4 points. And when you take the 5th game, that is 2 points. So it's a lot of factors to really think about here in the 5th. Makes the 5th game exciting, makes the 5th game competitive. It makes it all kinds of feels, as they call it. So we are going to show up here in the 5th game. Bryan Hebert releases on lane 32 at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. And that's a 7 drop to open up with. Bryan Hebert possibly getting a 2nd wind here. Spare shot should be fairly moderately easy. I will say, I'll put moderately in air quotes, because he sailed off to the right. Might have gotten a little bit overexcited on that one. 1, 2, and 7 pins on the deck for Bryan Hebert. He fires, and he misses again twice in a row. That's a 7 box for Bryan Hebert to open up. 1 down, 9 to go here in the 5th and final game of the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, this 5-match series. You're watching the ACST. I'm Steve Kelly. That's Bryan Hebert on lane 32. Bryan Hebert in the blue, our home bowler tonight from Lakeside Lanes in Manchester, New Hampshire. He releases on lane 32 for the first ball of the 2nd frame, dropping 3. 7 up, 3 down. 7 up, 3 down for Hebert. Hebert releases on the pocket. A good attempt, but not quite what he was looking for. The 2 and the 5 pins are on the deck. Shooting for a 10 box, 8, 9, or 10 box for Bryan Hebert. Fires, takes 1 more out for the road. That's a 9 box, leaving the 5 pin on the deck. And he sits at 16 after 2. So yeah, so we're at Academy Lanes. Again, CompuScore is the scoring software used here. It's the scoring software I inspired my stream scoreboard based off of, down to the fonts and everything. Might be what you call clean room reverse engineering. Anything to make it look like default Excel for sure. Bryan Hebert dropping 7-1-3-6. Lane 32. And for the spare, he just can't quite pull it off. Missing the head pin. The head pin in particular has been like kryptonite for Bryan tonight. For a 10 box. Fires. It's going to be a 9 box. 25 after 3 for Bryan Hebert Jr. So before we go tonight, just want to also remind you, we have Candlepin Bowling Network on YouTube and Candlepin Corner on YouTube. The Skins show on Candlepin Corner in particular, I want you to check out. We have ongoing roll-offs and ongoing tapings for Skins. I think the next one might be in June, if I remember. Someone correct me in the comments on when that date is, if I have that wrong. But Corey Alisi, if you're watching, I know you bowl here out of Academy Lanes, so... Bryan Hebert for a spare opportunity on that 3-6-7 leave. Takes out the 3 and the 6, but the 7 pin stands tall. Hebert for a 9 or 10, and he'll take a 9. But also Candlepin Bowling Network on YouTube. Check it out. We have the Candlepin Pro Series up there from about a week and some change ago. Congrats to Aaron St. Cyr for winning the Candlepin Pro Series. We had a bunch of streams on there. I was one of them, and we also had Bob Lee, Greg Guyart, and Paul Grant. We were covering that whole day of Sweet 16, Elite 8, semifinal, and final matches. Kind of modeled off of basketball there, the NBA Finals. Bryan Hebert dropping 3, leaving 7 on the deck, shooting for a spare. And takes out a few more for the road, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 box for Bryan Hebert. He's at 34 after 4 here in the 5th and final game. He's about to conclude his final first half here in this 5-game series. That's a 6 box for Bryan Hebert for 40 after 5. And Jonathan Hogan will now step up to the plate, step up to the approach for the final first half of the night. It's been quite a tightly woven match that has shifted tides significantly across the 4 games, originally in Hogan's favor, but swung now in Bryan Hebert's favor, which is wild. It's a fun game in terms of determining who's going to win, because originally I thought maybe Jonathan Hogan had it in the bag based off of how well he did at the beginning, but he kind of fell off a cliff here towards the end. So let's see what Jonathan Hogan can do. He drops 8, 2-7 on the deck. And I just heard an that never sounds good. Too much to the left, takes out only the 7, leaving the 2 pin on the deck. Shooting for a 10 box, Jonathan Hogan. Jonathan Hogan in the green on lane 32 at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts in the blue room. Misses the pin, but the ball is hanging out on lane 32. And I have a feeling... Nope, he's going to give up on it. That's a 9 box. 49... Nope, not 49. Just 9 after 1 for Jonathan Hogan. There we go. Again, needless to say, check out candlepin.org and click Go Bowling to find your nearest center. Look at that map of Candlepin bowling centers. All over New England, all over New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont. There's also some in Canada, not shown on the map, but if you're up in Canada, check it out as well. International sport, Candlepin bowling, even if international is merely just this corner of the planet. Jonathan Hogan for a spare, and he knocks out that single pin spare. Something we haven't seen a lot tonight, but that is a spare for Jonathan Hogan. That is his 3rd spare for the night, and he has only 1 strike for the night. He sits at 19 plus a ball after 2. On the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, Hogan fires for a 5-fill, 6-fill, 7-fill, 8-fill. Pins fell late. That's an 8-fill on a spare. Backdoor action going on there, leaving the 1 and the 10 pins on the deck. Could be another nice spare. There is a piece of wood that is jutting outwards to the left of the head pin. And he misses the head pin, but wow, that piece of wood that was jutting out might have stopped that forward motion of the deadwood heading towards the head pin. The head pin remains 9 or 10 box for Jonathan Hogan he's shooting for. And can't quite get it. Hits the piece of wood behind the 10-pin, launching out that piece of wood towards the front of it. 9 box, 36-3 for Jonathan Hogan as he clears that piece of wood. Let's take another look at Jonathan Hogan once again. He's currently, again, the division leader in D North Division 4. 147 and 77. He's had an awesome season with a 102.7 average. 142 and 552, high 1 and high 5 respectively. 7 drop on the first ball for Jonathan Hogan. He slides the 8-pin slightly to the left, along with the 7 and the 4 pins. Might be an easier spare since the 8-pin slid left, but we'll see what happens. He releases, and he gets it. That's another spare for Jonathan Hogan, the second spare of the half, second spare of the game. He's at 46 plus a ball after 4. And I'll give you a couple extra seconds to check this out while we're just waiting on the pin reset. 82-17 seasonal total pins for Jonathan Hogan. That's a significant margin higher than Bryan Hebert's. Bryan Hebert, might I remind you, has 7,182 seasonal total pins. 5 on the spare for Jonathan Hogan. And that is the 4 horseman right side plus the 8-pin that he's shooting for. He's at 51 after 4 by my account. He releases no third spare in the half, but decent bid, leaving the head pin. Again, leaving the head pin. I've been saying that a lot tonight. A lot of these spare leaves have been destructive aside from the crucial head pin, standing tall. And head pin's been a little bit like kryptonite tonight. That's a 9 box for Hogan. 60 after 5. That's more like it. 60 after 5 for Hogan, 40 after 5 for Hebert. This is an important 5th game with 6 points on the line. Both of our bowlers. So we are at even points. 404 for Hogan, 402 for Hebert. Hogan has the match by 2. Hebert has the game by 20. I don't know where this is going to go, folks. We'll find out. Hebert off the head pin to the right, dropping 5. 4 horsemen left side in the 10 pin. And Hebert will be shooting the 1 and the 2 pocket, but he has to be careful with that piece of wood in between the 1 and the 2. That could derail the ball. And the ball was a little bit too full, and it actually bounces and hangs around before flying out into the void. 7, 8, 9, or 10 box, no spare. The 4, the 7, and the 10 pins are on the deck. He fires, and ouch. That's out for a 7 box for Bryan Hebert. 47-6. That was a foul. The ball went into the gutter, jutted out. Bryan Hebert was very quick to call it. Very helpful for everyone involved in the scoring. Thank you, Bryan. Great sportsmanship to see that. Anyways, 47 after 6 for Bryan Hebert. Fires again, working on a strike, seeing if he can find a strike. He's got no strikes tonight, but that was definitely not a strike. That was a 4 drop, or a 1 drop of the 4, lemon drop. On the head pin this time, a corrective ball, but doesn't quite take anything out. That would have been helpful in terms of the spare. He's left with the 3, 6, 10, and 7 with a wiggly 7. Taking 2 more out for the road, he leaves the 3 and the 7 for an 8 box. 55-7 for Bryan Hebert now. Bryan Hebert having a bit of a nervous final game here. Here's Hebert's stats again. 12th overall in the division, 92 and 118. You know, Bryan's been punching, and I think he might need to slow down a little bit. I've seen this. I bowl with Bryan in leagues, so I kind of know when I see this. He needs to kind of slow down a little bit and consider where that ball is landing, particularly when you release. So might I remind you, the blue room in Academy, this room, has synthetic approaches, but wood lanes. And where you first release that ball and where it catches means the world, because that means when you throw the ball and it catches to curve or spin or make any additional impact that you're trying to put on the ball, some call it English, that gets drastically affected based on the grade of the ground. And if you have a half synthetic, half wood situation like we have here, where the approach is synthetic and the lanes are wood, and hey, there's a strike for Bryan. Finally, he was looking for that one. And you might have saw it while I was yakking, but he threw that ball a little bit slower, slightly slower than he was when he was punching out, and I think that made all the difference. But if you watch on the wide camera, watch where he releases and watch where the ball lands. If it lands before the ball return, if it lands before the foul line,
that's where the ball usually gets into trouble and sails out of where you're intending to send it. If you release past the foul line, obviously before the lob line, it's going to go in a much more favorable area. Bryan Hebert fills that strike with 10. I know he really wanted that spare on strike, but wasn't meant to be. It was off the object a little bit, leaving only the 3-pin on the deck for a 10 box. He's going to conclude this ACST match with a 9 box and 91 in 10. That's a 5-game total of 553 for Bryan Hebert. 453, excuse me. Not 553, 453 5-game total for Bryan Hebert. No game over 100 tonight, but his third and second games were the best. Jonathan Hogan with a 60 half, though. This is where the money is made now. Jonathan Hogan now working on a 60 half. Mostly just has to kind of cruise control his way to the 10th box, but can't sleep on it, though, as we saw in the previous few games with Jonathan Hogan. He really needs to make sure he stays on it. Gets the pins, gets the marks. Don't throw any ball away. Don't take it for granted. See that release by Jonathan Hogan, you'll see that he threw it past the foul line and before the lob line, so obviously a legal ball, but you'll see it. He has a bit more of a degree of control. I think the problem with that ball was he just had to physically start his approach maybe a step to the left or so. That one, again, closer, but it'll take a 9. I think it's just about the starting approach for Jonathan Hogan. With Bryan Hebert, it has to do with slowing it down a bit and also making sure he doesn't release it early. Don't drop it before the foul line, basically. So Hogan at 69 after 6. Compare that to Bryan Hebert's 47 after 6. Hogan with a considerable lead in the game as of the 6th box. And he takes out a few more for the road. 3 down, 7 up. For a spare on lane 31, Jonathan Hogan. Thank you for watching the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Hogan fires on the pocket for the spare. He doesn't quite get it. He's left with the 2 and the 5. Before we go tonight, just want to give a couple of special thanks to our ACST League Commissioner Danny Finn, our statistics and all of our numbers, all crunched by Micah Imperato. Bryan Hebert also for helping me with designing some of the graphics used in the matches, some of the design direction, the general aesthetics. Really helps. I'm not the greatest design person in the world, but Bryan Hebert can have just a nice second pair of eyes helping me out with that. Staff at Academy Lanes here for maintaining a very busy house. And thanks for watching. It's always a pleasure to cast these matches for you. If you guys have any suggestions, comments, or anything, I'm generally someone who tends to read the comments after the fact just to kind of focus on the match and everything, but I do read them. I do go back and check them out, so let me know if you have any suggestions or anything. This is an ever work in progress doing these streams at Candlepin Alleys, and sometimes you never know what to expect, so that's just kind of how things go here. So Hogan, meanwhile, 78 and 7, shooting for a 10 box. He's going to take another 8. That puts him at 86 and 8 compared to Bryan Hebert's 63 and 8. Check this out. 2 to go. Hogan might be able to lock this up. Currently, we're at 6 and 4 in terms of points, but we'll see how things shake out here. 6 to 4, not counting the total. The total is important. Hogan needs to make up 23 pins to tie for the total and 24 to take 4 points. So, and that deficit is dropping. 4 down. 6 up for Jonathan Hogan after the first ball. He shoots for the spare. Heard another ugh. Never good to hear an ugh. 1, 2, 5, 7, and 8 for a 10 box. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 box for Jonathan Hogan. Lane 31, Academy Lanes, at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. I'm Steve Kelly. That's Jonathan Hogan on lane 31. It's a 9 box. It's a nice out, as Bryan encourages John. 95 in 9. And that will be the 5th game for Jonathan Hogan. He'll take at least 2 points for that. And now it's a race for the total. 14 for Jonathan Hogan to tie. 15. He needs a mark and a 5 fill to take the 4 points. Let's see what happens. This is an exciting box right here. He drops 7. That's a good start. Bit of an awkward leave, but 1, 8, and 10 pins are on lane 31 for Jonathan Hogan to shoot at. Needs this spare to take 4 points. This is a big ball. This is a valuable ball for Jonathan Hogan. And we're going to see the results of that spare ball now. Hogan releases past the foul line. Good attempt. Good offer. Will it go? 10 pins wobbling. That's the 4 points right there. Oh, that's a wiggly 10. And you ever see 4 points just wiggle away? That just happened. He hit it right. He didn't hit it wrong. That was how I would have played it. So Hogan won't take the total. That's 104 for a 5-game total of 448 for Jonathan Hogan. Bryan Hebert will take the total. Oh my goodness. So Hebert will take 4 points. Hogan will take 6 points before we factor in the total. But let's take a look at the final stats here. So Bryan Hebert came into this with a 92 and 118. Jonathan Hogan came in with 147 and 77. And Hebert will take 8 win points, 6 loss points. Jonathan Hogan will take 6 win points and 8 loss points. That rounds it out to Hebert making it into the 100 club for the wins. 100 and 124, Hebert's new record. Jonathan Hogan taking 6 points will go to 153 and 85. So that is how the point spread is going to go. Hebert averaging 91, Hogan averaging 90. Hebert just barely eking out the W in terms of just majority points. Equal strikes, equal spares, and only 2 more 10s that Hebert achieved. Jonathan Hogan with a 24% perfect box percentage, just 4 down from Hebert. This was a close match. Definitely a close match. And look at that point spread. First 2 games, 2 points for Hogan. Then it sways back, 2 points for Hebert. And then the 5th game, despite Hogan taking the 5th game, Hebert still took the total. That is wild. Look at that. That is the definition of competition right there. So win or lose, this has been an exciting match to watch, an exciting match to stream. I hope you guys enjoyed it just as much as I did. This has been awesome streaming and watching and just talking about the stats here. So anyways, that'll be it from us today at Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. If you're new to the world of Candlepin bowling content, thanks for watching. I hope this was a pleasant viewing experience for you, as it was for me. If you enjoyed what you saw and want to see more, I invite you to strike, comment, and subscribe to the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour on Facebook, as well as some of our other pages, including Candlepin Chat, Candlepin Corner, Candlepin Bowling Network, Alley Chat, the Candlepin Bowling Channel, and probably a bunch of others that I'm not remembering, where all kinds of other video streams and productions are regularly posted in addition to results and statistics. If you're a returning viewer, it's great to have you along once again. Hope you enjoyed this program. If you're into podcasts, there's Candlepin shows such as The Approach and Ripping the Rack, so check those out if you feel so inclined. And of course, if you thought this was exciting and you want to go bowling right now, check out candlepin.org and click Go Bowling to find your nearest center. I promise you it's going to be a fun time. Anyways, I've been Steve Kelly, and for Jonathan Hogan and Bryan Hebert, I hope you guys have an excellent evening, an excellent whatever it is, and we'll see you at the next Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour match. Have a great one, everybody.